when the Alliance of Concerned Men was working in Benning Heights. At that time, they called it Simple City. And was a very negative connotation to young people. It was violence out there. And as Tyrone mentioned, the murder rate in the city was well over 400. And working with the Alliance of Concerned Men and the brothers and sisters that were out there on the street at the level where the rubber meets the road, the real community, they were able to reduce it from over 400 down to 88. And they never really got the credit about the work they put in and the way they put it as equally the situation that was up at 6th and 7th and P and O Street with the young people who were involved in the violence and the fact that they were able to negotiate a truce and that the young people up there were very clear about what it was that they needed and wanted, as well as what it was addressed during that particular time. They've been able to put it in. Here in the district, we've been fortunate. About 2 years before COVID, we were able to secure a small grant from the Office of Victim Services. And at that time, we had worked out a project where we went up on Atlantic Street, up in Highland, and we had community meetings, pulled people together, and had community meetings and talked about this thing that Dr. Daniels talked about, reducing the footprint. That's what we called it. And it consisted of some academic work as well as some research, but it also consisted of people on the ground working in the community, organizing. And again, we had the honor and pleasure of working with Tyrone Parker and the Alliance of Concerned Men because they were the ones that was on the ground. We had secured an agreement from the National Association of Black Social Workers and Black Psychologists to work with us to address the issue. I don't know if Dr. Daniels will allow me. One of the things, and there's an example that I want to share with you all. There was a time in our city and across the country where when people wanted the police, they didn't call 911. But what has happened as a result of an aggressive, this was 20, 30 years ago, as a result of an aggressive campaign to sell and market the idea of a three-digit number that residents like you all could call to call the police. The resources that went into that campaign is just unmentionable. But as a result of that, if you ask the person how to get in touch with the police, you would say 911. That wasn't the case prior to, but now it is. The other example that I use is, does anyone know the number that they also marketed? Because what they found out in that experiment was that over 80% of the calls that went into 911 were not what? They were not emergencies. So in an attempt to download the non-emergency calls off of 911 so they could focus on the emergency call, what did they create? 311. That's exactly right. And so why do we call 311? And the point that I'm making is that that's the conditioning and the marketing and the other things that are taking place that have us in the place in our communities and relying on something that doesn't work. One of the things that we found out when we were in Highland is that as people were conditioned to call the police, what was really happening was that when the police got there, they didn't do anything. So the question is, why would you call somebody to handle something that don't take care of it once they get there? Once we went through that process, and it was a process, because they had to unlearn what they had learned. And once they unlearned what they had learned, and we identified the resources utilizing the asset evaluation process, or asset survey process in Highland, the real issue was that the resources to address the issues that were happening in Highland existed in Highland. As Tyrone often says, most of the time the solution is in the problem. That's exactly what he says all the time, and it's very true. And he says that from experience because he's done been there. So That's what we're talking about. We have the background, we have the hearts, the mind, the energy, and we're looking for places that we can do that. And of course, Washington is going to be, DC is going to be one of those places. Because the Chocolate City, even though we're in a different era in Washington, to me, it's still the Chocolate City. I was born and raised here, and I only rotate in those areas where it's the Chocolate City, because since I'm not white, I don't go to those areas. I go to the areas where the black folk live.